Hey everybody, it's Rick and thanks for joining me on another Inwyt Walkabout. I am walking in my neighborhood today. Give you a little view of the side here. It's another typical spring day in New England. We had a weekend that started out with cold rain with temps in the 40s to having had some beautiful sunshine this morning, and now clouds and moderate temps, but it's supposed to rain again. So we enjoy what we have and just continue to move on. I wanted to spend a little bit of time today talking about violence and maybe the ubiquity of it and the nuance of violence from what, I would say we would consider very obvious examples to probably more subtle expressions that we might not even consider as being violent because they're so common in our everyday behavior that it's probably not even noticeable as such. So I'm going to start out, kind of work backwards from the overt, obvious to the subtle, and start out with a definition or a meaning for violence that I'm going to apply here that, again, is not necessarily the dictionary definition, but one that I think hopefully describes what we're looking at, not the image that we have about it. And I'm going to use the definition of violence for us as a forceful imposition to accomplish something that we want. So keep that in mind. And we all know, at the highest levels, at the international, global level, that, violence fits our image of whatever definition we have as far as the wars that are going on in the Middle East, in the Ukraine. There are clashes going on basically everywhere all the time. And there's no doubt, I would say, that anybody would disagree that that's violent. At the national level, if we look at our own country, again, plenty of examples of overt expressions of violence. Here, think about all of the clashes that are going on around immigration these days. Again, forceful imposition to accomplish something that one group wants, and forceful counterpoint of trying to oppose and create conditions or hold on to conditions that people want to uphold. So examples at the national level, at the city level, there are clearly overt examples of inner city violence, socioeconomics, the haves, the have-nots, crime, and the manifestations of gun violence. All those things are very, very obvious and very troubling, and instill a lot of fear. And when we get down to the family level, again, there are overt examples of family-related violence, partner abuse, child abuse, again, things that maybe are less visible, but when they are clearly viewed as manifestations of violence. But now they're a little bit more hidden, so maybe less obvious. And then we start to get down to what I would say is violence or forceful imposition that starts to become the norm, in where we might not start to define that as violence. And that is, at, again, the family level, where if you, watch my hat here, where if you think about, again, forceful imposition of trying to get something that you want, think about being a parent and how we all have certain values and expectations for our kids that in many instances is, what I would say is non-negotiable. You have to do well in school. You should be an athlete. you have to go to church. There's all kinds of impositions that we, essentially forcefully impose with the belief that, it's the right thing to do. And again, we don't necessarily see that at all as being violent. We see that as, well, that's something that just has to happen. And so now we start to get into this slippery slope, right? You walk your dog, and, I walk my dog, and my dog is curious, and, it's constantly stopping and sniffing and rolling in things that, you basically don't want in your house. And so what do? They're on a leash. You pull them along or you pull them out. And again, it's a forceful imposition of what you want your dog to do that, again, is in that definition of a form of violence. And when you start to actually look at your own behavior, whether it's at work, and again, you think about change initiatives where, a lot of us as leaders show up and say, we have to do this thing. You must behave in a certain way, or you must accomplish a certain activity, and we're going to measure compliance and reward you if you do it and penalize if you don't. Again, there's an element of forced imposition that again starts to have the elements of violence associated with it that we would probably not consider. And when you get to the very personal level, think about all of the activities and all of the behaviors that each and every one of us imposes upon ourselves, whether it's health related, I need to exercise, I need to eat right, whatever it is. Consider the stress and, not necessarily the overt pain, but in many cases, there is overt damage emotionally or physically with overdoing things because of that forced imposition, if you will, that again becomes an element of violence. So, what's the point behind this? It's not, again, to make a judgment here of right or wrong. It's basically just saying, watch how we behave and see how our everyday lives and our behaviors in our very personal lives or in our personal way of thinking actually very quickly and easily escalate to the massive conflicts that take place globally. And, again, it's one of those things where perhaps when you start to say, well, how do we end violence and where do we start? There's always, number one, a potential for people to say, well, I'm not responsible for the violence that's out there. And so I'm working at it from a neutral space to trying to find solutions that are well removed from one's own behavior and starting there without recognizing that the solutions that we're putting in place are actually driven by the same source of violence that we're identifying out there, which is a forceful imposition to basically get what we want. So again, it's not the real challenge here is not to do something as much as it is to start becoming more aware of how innate and how up close and personal this most extreme manifestation actually shows up in our own everyday lives and behavior, and just to observe it and to try to understand the mechanisms and really to ask the question without really looking for a specific answer as to whether it is actually possible to problem solve or to go through life without violence, without a forced imposition to get something that you want. And again, we've talked about all of these things before, and particularly how division, fragmentation, what we think is and what we think should be, all of those things are what create conflict and what create the drive or the will or the perception that, or notion that we have to actually force action in a particular direction. And essentially what we're doing is just reinforcing and repeating the sources of what's showing up as extreme violence to begin with. So think about that in your daily lives, is just watch how you are forcing and imposing your principles, your ideas, your values on yourself, on others, and how that very quickly translates into an escalated manifestation that then starts to fit the image that, we basically reject. We accept it to a point, and then we reject it when it gets overtly violent and somebody gets physically hurt. So that's it for today. As you think about those things, I hope you have a good day. I hope you have a wonderful week exploring, just looking, not judging, just look. And I look forward to next time. This is Rick with Inwyt Walkabout. Take care.